brands don't reply to 60% of their inbound leads on their,
amazing.
It's crazy, but they're likely to respond to us because we have this audience, we have this influence in the franchise space. We're getting thousands and thousands of leads a month, and they have more of an incentive to want to talk to us because we can kind of help filter out the tire kickers for them.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Hi, it's John Hayes, another episode of the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast. And my guest today is Alex Smereczniak. He is the co-founder and CEO of Franzy, which is a business that's less than a year old. Alex, welcome, and give us just a elevator pitch on what is Franzy.
Yeah, Dr. Hayes, thank you for having me on, first of all. And the quick elevator pitch on Franzy is, think of it as the Zillow for franchising. So similar to what Zillow did to democratize access to real estate data for all of us looking at homes or vacation homes. You can see school district tax, etc. Franzy is doing for the next wave of entrepreneurs when they go to buy a franchise business. They can see all the financial data, closure data. What are consumer sentiments? What are other franchisees saying? All of that information in one spot, so that those entrepreneurs are making a well-informed, data-driven decision.
Great. So how did you discover franchising? Let's back up and talk about that, because nobody grows up saying, I'm going to be in franchising someday, or goes to college for that reason, unless you're a Titus kid or you're a Dwyer kid. Most people don't have those opportunities. So how did you discover franchising, and why, and what got you into it?
Do you want the long, medium, or short answer?
Let's try the short, and then we'll see what I want to cut into.
Yep. Yeah. So the short answer is, before Franzy, I had pivoted my last company into a franchise model. So we were doing laundry and dry cleaning, pickup and delivery, mostly just a marketplace. Think Uber for laundry and dry cleaning. Eventually, we vertically integrated and built physical laundromats. And then we realized we need hundreds of laundromats, and laundromats aren't cheap. What if we franchise part of the model, the brick and mortar part? So we started franchising LaundroLab in 2021. It's a retail laundromat franchise. And we sold about 118 locations in our first 24 months or so.
Prior to that, though, you were still in franchising, or no?
So prior to that, it was, think more of like a Silicon Valley venture-backed tech startup. So when this was in 2014, when all the Uber for X models popped up, so Instacart for grocery delivery, Postmates and DoorDash for food delivery, Wagon Rover for dog walking, I thought someone's going to do this for laundry and dry cleaning because everyone has to do it, and most people hate doing it. And so we started a tech company and a marketplace business for helping Dr. Hayes have his laundry and dry cleaning picked up from outside his office or his home door. We'd have it brought to cleaners and laundromats, cleaned within 24 hours, and brought back right to your front door.
Yeah, good. Okay, so franchising attracts a lot of young people. You're a young guy, and probably your friends are young as well, and you collaborate with them on ideas of what to do. Why franchise brokerage, which is essentially is what Franzy is all about, right? I mean, you're brokering franchise opportunities for people who don't know anything about franchising, usually, stumble across it one way or another, and think, I need some help figuring this out. What do I buy? Because there's so many opportunities, and so many bad opportunities, quite frankly. So what led you away from being a franchisor and into becoming a franchise supplier, specifically in the broker niche?
Yep, it's a great question. So my background before all the laundry stuff was, I was a finance major, and I did management consulting at Ernst & Young.
All right.
So kind of wired to think analytically, and very much love problem solving. And then I found my way into this kind of Silicon Valley tech startup type world, and I loved it. I was hooked on business building, solving problems, and franchising. I think, like many people who are outside of it, I looked at as like, oh, it's McDonald's, it's Subway. You have to already have a lot of money to do franchising right. Or there's this part where there's misalignment and, people trying to sell you concepts. And I had all these kind of stigmas that I didn't know better to know about. And then when we started franchising the laundromat business, I got exposure to what part of my, assumptions were right and what were wrong. And one of the things that jumped out at me were just the sheer volume of commissions being paid out to different sales organizations, franchise sales organizations like FSOs, broker networks. We worked with FranChoice and IFPG, and we worked with Brand One as our FSO. And there was a lot of good to that, and there was also parts that I thought could be improved. And that's where this idea for Franzy came up, was talking to dozens and dozens of other brands and hearing that they're paying 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70% plus commissions of their franchise fee. And I thought, there's got to be a more capital efficient way to do this. Let's break down the problem. And what it is brands are, as they're emerging, they have corporate stores they have to open or maintain. They've got franchise locations they're opening. They're building a team for the first time. They might be raising money to make sure they're capitalized to go do this. Franchise sales, as important as it is, it's not their core competency. They're really good at maybe supply chain or menu innovation or running the coffee shop or whatever their business may be. Packaging up their concept and selling it is a new motion for them. And so they kind of inevitably end up working with brokers, FSOs, to give them that support. But if you think about the steps in that sales process, let's say it's 10 steps, 7 of those steps are happening internally by the brand, no matter how you cut it. Either the founder is doing the rapport building and the relationship building, an internal sales team or sales member is doing it, or they're working with a third party, an FSO, to do it. That, I'd say, is 70% of the process. The first 2 or 3 steps are really top of funnel, lead gen, light qualifying or qualification, and then matchmaking. And that's where a broker can step in, or organic channels, podcasts like this, paid ads, etc. This is where I saw brokers being paid 50, 60, 70% commissions, but doing these first 2 or 3 steps. And I thought, can technology automate a good bit of this while also allowing the positive parts of what a broker does, really helping coach and guide someone through the process. So long answer short, Franzy helps with top of funnel. We've got 4,000 brands on the platform, but then we use AI to help John curate John's top 5, top 10 based on your financial readiness, your operational experience, your risk tolerance, and your goals and interests. And then you do have access to a coach or someone that has franchise experience to help you find the right lender, negotiate with brands, talk through brands, et cetera. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
And are you affiliated with one of the consulting groups like FranServe, FranChoice, you mentioned already, IFPG? Do you have an affiliation with one of them?
Nope, we've gone kind of completely out on our own. We have 4,000 brands on the platform, hundreds that are verified and have signed legal agreements with us. And our whole goal is to remain as objective as possible in the process. So we get paid a flat dollar amount if we do help an individual find the brand, so that we have no incentive to promote one brand over the other. And so the reason we've decided to go kind of independent is so that we can remain objective through that process. Our goal is ultimately to help people find the best business for them, the right fit for them, not the one that pays the highest commission.
And how much AI goes into that? Or do you, for example, if I decided I wanted to become a franchisee and I really didn't know anything about it, and I thought, maybe there were 1,000 brands, not 4,000 brands, and I don't know what's a good brand, what's a bad brand, how to investigate a brand. But, there's a lot that I don't know about franchising that would be important to me had I known it before I became a franchisee. For example, one of the things that has bugged me for years is that if you don't do something as simple as giving a prospective franchisee a disc profile or any number of profiles, the disc is the least expensive and can be very effective in identifying strengths and weaknesses of franchise candidates. Most franchisors do not do this, don't want to do this. It certainly can't be the money, because you can do this so inexpensively. Probably it's because they don't want anything getting in the way of the sale. And sometimes they will say, well, we don't want to play God. We want to give everybody an opportunity. We're not going to disqualify anyone. But my position on that is franchisors should disqualify people. Anybody who doesn't have a profile that would put them in your top 25% of performers, and in fact would likely put them in the bottom 25% of performers, you should disqualify. You have an obligation, in fact, to do that. It's just good business to do that, and also protects your brand. And every franchisor knows what are the strengths and weaknesses, or what's the disc profile of the people who produce the most and are the happiest in our network. Those people are validators, for one thing. If you want to look at it commercially and selfishly, those are the people who are going to help you get more franchisees. But if they end up in the bottom, you're going to spend so much money paying attention to them, trying to train them, pulling your hair out, saying, what's wrong with these people? We give them the same training we give the top franchisees. Well, there's nothing wrong with those people. It's what's wrong with you. You're not training them in a mode that they can accept, or they're never going to make it in your business because they don't have the right profile to do it. How could you not use a disc profile? And most franchisors do not. So I take it from the other side. I educate prospective franchisees when I speak at these franchise expos, or when I write online, when I teach in the classroom, and I explain to them, you might want to be an ABC franchisee, but do you know if you have what it takes to become an ABC franchisee? And sure, the salesperson's going to say, you're perfect. The broker, the consultant, not all of them will do that, but a lot of them, because they see a sales opportunity, they're just going to say, you're perfect for what we want, when you're not perfect. You didn't have a basic profile. So that's one thing. That how does Franzy help with that? And then, of course, it would be easier to help with, well, do you have enough money? Because here's how much is required. And sometimes what's required isn't enough money. Some franchisors are, getting people sold, and they know they don't have enough money. But if they do everything just right, they will have enough money. So how do you all stay objective, and how do you help someone who I'm describing say, all right, I really need to be in the auto industry, and I can forget about all the other ones that might be exciting, but let me go for that. How's that work? Do you use AI in the process?
We use a ton of AI, because something that you said, and I think I've heard you say on other episodes too, is that how can one person adequately know enough about thousands of brands? Even 30 brands is a lot to truly know and understand. And that's where AI can be a really helpful kind of co-pilot or guide through this process if used correctly. And so with the AI that we've trained it on 26,000 FDDs as one data source. We have the average revenue, cost, store closure, store opening, bankruptcy litigation, et cetera. So that's one thing. We also then pull in census data, Bureau of Labor Statistics data, consumer reviews of these actual businesses. So what do consumers of Dave's Hot Chicken think in Florida versus Georgia versus Texas? Is this a brand that could do well in these markets? We're starting to pull in competitive data. So if you're looking at a Gutter Brothers franchise, what other home services or gutter cleaning franchises are in this area? Are they doing well? So you can get a lay of the competitive land. So we're pulling in all this data, and then we're also pulling in very personalized, unique data about John Hayes himself, right? It's what are you financially ready to do? What are you operationally good at? And so we learn a lot about your background. Are you more of a sales-oriented leader? Are you better at building teams? Are you more of an introvert, extrovert? And we don't do DISC, but we do what's called predictive index as part of some of this, where we start to get a sense for, what is this archetype of this persona? And then on the brand side, we ask them for this perfect prospect survey where they're telling us who is their ideal franchisee, to your point, who's their top 10, top 25% of operators. And then we're using AI to pair against the two to say, hey, John has a high likelihood that he's going to be a top performer. Now, we don't play God in the sense of telling the brand or the individual, you absolutely shouldn't do this, but we give them all the data where it's obvious to say, hey, John might have $10 million, but his fit score for your brand specifically is 20%. You guys do what you will with that, and hopefully they have the wherewithal and longer term thinking to say, hey, even though John has the money, he's going to be a headache in 2 years because he doesn't have the operational chops, or he doesn't plan on bringing in a GM. And sometimes those questions need to get asked, because even though the score is low, your solution to that might be, I am going to hire a GM that is a better operator than I am, and I have enough capital to do that, and that's a fine solution. But we at least give people the information to start having that conversation.
And do you tell John that he's only got 20% a match for this particular business?
Yeah, because we'll see it on his side too. If it says, hey, I'm a sales-oriented leader, or I only want to work in the business 5 hours a week, but the business is saying they need operators that are in the business 40 hours a week, we're going to say, John, look, the most successful franchisees are hands-on. They're in this business for 40 hours, at least in the first year or two, and then they hire a GM and start to remove themselves. Are you capable of doing that, and does that answer switch for you? If the answer is, yeah, I'm going to quit my job, or I'm going to carve out time in this way and that, then we don't want to preclude them from making that decision, but we are broaching that subject and having that conversation.
Yeah. Does it cost the consumer? Does it cost John money to use Franzy, to go and get profiled?
Not today. Our thought was, this is already a really big, scary decision, and there's lots of free or easily accessible data out there. For Franzy to really be useful, we thought, hey, it's got to be low barrier to entry for them from an education perspective, using the AI tool, the search tool, the lending. Can we monetize from the various suppliers? So we also generate revenue off of lending referrals and franchise CPA referrals and giving access to these other services that they're going to need. We monetize through those introductions as well as the brand introduction, but only if that individual becomes a franchisee of that brand.
So where is the monetization? Do you sell the leads to franchise companies, and is it just one company because they want to be in the gutter business and whatever brand that might be, or they want to be Mosquito Joe, or they want to be Sinorama? Do you sell just to one franchisor, and how does that work?
Nope. So when we looked at this, we were a franchisor previously, and we looked at the things that worked for us and things that didn't, what we liked about those other channels and didn't like. And we didn't like the lead gen platforms because now there's an incentive to sell as many emails and people with a pulse, a referral to all these different brands. And we didn't want to have a misaligned incentive that way. We looked at charging a monthly subscription to the brands, but some of these brands, they're emerging and they don't have a ton of capital to spend on a monthly, recurring expense. And especially us being newer, we wanted to prove ourselves before doing a subscription. We might go to a subscription model eventually, but for now, didn't want to. And then we looked at, do we charge success-based like a broker does today? Hey, we only get paid if there's actually an outcome that the brand and the individual both benefit from and like. And we thought, all right, the broker's got that piece right. What I didn't like is this percentage-based approach, because some franchise fees are, $60K and some are $20K. So what do you think the average person is going to do? Their incentive is to sell to the higher commissioned one. They can make 3 times as much money.
Yeah.
And while they should still do that ethically, you also can't blame them for operating that way. If someone's going to say, hey, you're going to make, 75 grand versus 25 grand, well, most people are going to want to make 75 grand. And so our thought was, let's eliminate that incentive entirely, and we just get paid a flat dollar amount regardless of brand. Sure, we could have made more on some brands and we would have made less on others, but at least it's inherently the right ethical and morally aligned thing to do for both the brand and the individual. So regardless of brand, we get paid the same amount. And that's how we get paid today, is through those introductions that become franchisees.
And how much is that amount? And do you only get paid if they become a franchisee?
Yep, we only get paid if they become a franchisee. It's about $20K for one unit, $15K for a second, $10K for a third. Some instances will go lower if it's there's a brand that comes to mind where their franchise fee is 10 grand. We can't charge them more than that because we want to make sure that they're in a good place to reinvest in their franchisee. Our goal, though, is to get to 15K or 10K flat across the board. So it's just a no-brainer, and we're driving so much volume through the platform that it's one of the most cost-efficient ways for people to find the right brand and the brand to attract the right franchisee.
Sometimes this becomes an issue where a consultant doesn't work on behalf of a certain brand because it's not part of their group. And the prospect doesn't know about that brand. And even if the consultant does, the consultant doesn't want to talk about it, because why would you want to help a brand get a franchisee who you don't represent, you're not going to get paid. This represents a little bit of a conundrum for people. The larger groups that represent so many franchisors, okay, not a problem. But if you're a broker and you're limited to how many brands you're representing, it's unfair to the prospect that, number one, you don't know, you might know the brand, but you're not going to talk about it because you can't get paid. Or number two, the brand's fee is so low, like you mentioned, a $10,000 franchise fee, which still exists but is unusual, or particularly in the emerging businesses. But that's the right one for that prospect to buy, but they'll never find out about it. You seem to be bypassing all of that. You mentioned you have 4,000 brands, and we say there are 4,000 brands in America, North America.
That's exactly right. So what happens is, let's say John comes to the platform and you have what's called a Franzy fit score. That's the AI curated percent fit, unique to John based on all the unique things we know about you and all the things we know about the brands. There's probably 100 different factors we're combining into, to make these matches. And so you do this fit score and you see that, honey baked ham, is the right one for you. And if Franzy doesn't have that yet, you can tell if they're verified or not. If they're verified, we have it. If they're unverified, we don't. And what we say is, John, we're going to go to work to get in connection with honey baked ham, and we're going to get you in front of them. There's a statistic out there that brands don't reply to 60% of their inbound leads on their.
Amazing.
It's crazy, but. They're likely to respond to us because we have this, audience. We have this influence in the franchise space. We're getting, thousands and thousands of leads a month, and they have more of an incentive to want to talk to us because we can kind of help filter out the tire kickers for them. So let us go talk to them. We also give you the option, though. Hey, here's the link to Honey Baked Ham's site. If you want to go ahead and fill out an intake form, go for it. We don't want to stop you. At the end of the day, we want John to find the right brand, and right now it seems like Honey Baked Ham is the one that's good for you to talk to.
Yeah.
So. Our thought is that we might give up some deals here and there, but in the long run, it's the right thing to do. It's the good way to operate the business, and it'll come back 10 times over. And we've already seen that on a small scale where we helped John get into a brand that we don't have, but you used us for lending, and we at least made some money there by introducing you to the right lender. Mm-hmm. But then you've sent 6 of your friends our way that have asked you, John, how did you get into this business? And you're like, here's these guys that are doing it in a very aligned way. They're going to give you honest advice. Heck, they got me into a brand that they didn't even get paid off of. Mm-hmm. And you start to talk positively about us in the community. And at the end of the day, it was the right thing for you and the right thing for the brand to have found each other the way that you did. We just have to do a better job of making sure next time we've got Honey Baked Ham verified and on the platform.
Hopefully that doesn't happen to you very often, that you're not already connected with someone who a prospect wants to buy, but I can see how that's the case. But there's also another issue. I often say, we have supposedly, nobody knows any of this for sure, 4,000 brands in North America. We say we do. We say that every year.
More.
We've been saying it for years. When I was about your age, the number was 2,000. We said that for years, and then, I don't know, somehow we jumped to 4,000. And I'm sure Fran Data does have data that shows that there are that many brands. Some of them are regional. Some of them only have one franchisee or no franchisees yet, or 20 franchisees. And some of them you should not buy. I think there are probably 1,000 brands at least that I wouldn't want my family member to buy because it's not a good system. There's a lot of legal work going on behind the scenes that you wouldn't want to be part of, or it just doesn't work. Or the people are not trustworthy. What do you do in those cases? John lands on something he wants to buy, but you figured out, or AI has figured out, it not only doesn't line up with your values and your capabilities, it's not a good deal.
So we use the data and we use our experience to tell them exactly that feedback and that advice. There's been instances where people come in, they're like, I want a coffee shop. And this is like, you're in an area though where there's 60 other coffee shops. It's going to be very hard. He's like, well, I'm going to be better than all those 60.
Yeah, okay.
And there is a line where I think you have to, as long as you've given the data and you've given your, educated point of view, you still have to let people make their decisions. The analogy that I'll use is, real estate investors, Some people like getting into a distressed asset that's got a rocky foundation. They want to tear it down and they've got this playbook that they want to run. But I might not ever do that because my risk tolerance or my skills are different.
Exactly.
And there's this kind of tricky line for us to figure out, hey, John's maybe really good at turnarounds or in highly competitive things, and he's got this thesis and he wants to invest in his thesis, and we've done our job to give him the data to say, hey, this is going to be a hard uphill battle, but you might have a skill set and access to connections and experience that does set you up for success in this situation. The majority of people, though, couldn't figure out how to turn this thing around.
Right.
And we just need you to know that, yeah, I got it. I want to do this anyway. Well, then we have to let it go and let him do it anyway.
It's one of the areas, again, that needs to be looked into. How entrepreneurial are you? And people talk about, some franchisors even say, and I think to myself, I don't think they've been a franchisor very long, depending on how they're saying it, well, we're looking for entrepreneurs. That's too bad if you are. I mean, if you really mean that, because an entrepreneur doesn't follow a system. An entrepreneur doesn't want to follow a system. An entrepreneur wants to create the system. So years ago, when I wrote Franchising the Inside Story, which was way before you were born, Alex, that book it was the first book on franchising in the United States, and it introduced people to this. You mean I could go buy a lawn mowing business and it's franchised and they would help me get customers and tell me how to handle this and tell me which mowers to buy and where to do my marketing? Yeah, you could. I didn't know that either until I wrote the book and realized, wow, I'm teaching school for no money at Temple University in Philadelphia. I could go make $100,000 in one of these other businesses or any number of businesses. But if you're very entrepreneurial and you're thinking about business, you're a risk taker. And franchisors don't want risk takers. Does that come into play for you? Have you seen that, or you understand what I'm saying here? That it's you've got to be willing to follow a system. Entrepreneurs don't want to do that necessarily.
Completely. It's one of the spectrums that we actually gauge through our intake process, where we're really understanding and learning the person. And when we have our kind of coaching call, or we have a one-on-one call with some of our clients that come through, is I'll ask them sometimes, all right, one end of the spectrum is Chick-fil-A. It's probably the least entrepreneurial brand you can get into. Like if you sneeze the wrong way within the store, like you're out. Not exactly, but you got to follow rules to a T. You got to work a certain number of hours. You have to train, I think, for 6 months before you even are allowed. And then they require you to be an owner operator. This is the most buying yourself a job franchise you can possibly get into. And then the other end of the spectrum is the two guys or husband and wife that own two coffee shops that they've decided to franchise, and you're their first franchisee. Right. And they have no idea what the heck they're doing on site selection and training, which point of sale they're going to use at scale, and all these things. And guess what? You're probably going to get to build it with them. You're going to get to be very entrepreneurial. You're taking the biggest risk, though. You don't know if the franchise fee and the royalties you're going to be paying are going to be worth their salt in the next year or 2 years even, but you're going to get to have a say in how this thing gets built. Where are you on that spectrum? Are you Chick-fil-A, or are you Ken and Kathy's coffee shop that's just starting to franchise, or are you somewhere in between?
Yeah. And I want to point out that it's not a bad thing to buy yourself a job. And if it's with Chick-fil-A, the average owner-operator makes about $650,000 a year. So that's not such a bad job. People like to bash Chick-fil-A for lots of reasons. And it can take you, nobody becomes a Chick-fil-A franchisee this year. When you have about 100,000 applicants a year and you're going to select fewer than 100 people, you can afford to be very, very, very selective. And I'm a young woman who's a graduate of Palm Beach Atlantic University, where I teach, and has worked with Chick-fil-A for at least a dozen years. She's a manager. She does very, very well. Financially, she does very well, but she wants to be an owner-operator. Well, she's about 2 years, 3 years into the process, into the selection process. So even when you're talented like this young woman is, and you've got the experience, you can't just sign up and say, okay, I want $650,000 a year. That's the average franchisee. The good franchisees do a whole lot better. So it takes time to do that. They're very methodical. And they don't want failure in that system. They don't want to bring on somebody and give them all their insights. And Chick-fil-A has depth of information that, other brands, whether chicken or burger or pizza or whatever in food brands, they just can't afford to have. So there's a lot of, if you can become one, now you got to be cut out to become one, because as Chick-fil-A weeds out all of these people, makes it very clear, not everybody and not just anybody can become a Chick-fil-A owner-operator, which also points to not everybody should be a franchisee. Somebody ought to talk you out of this. And yet there are franchisors that would say, I'm wrong. If people want to put up their money and give it a shot, this is America, they should have the right to do that. Of course they have the right to do that. I wouldn't get in the way of it. But are you doing a really good job, an objective and fair job of educating them about what they're going to be up against? So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so part of our top of the funnel is a bunch of franchising 101 educational resources. We have a podcast called How I Franchise This as well. We have folks that left corporate America, or they were an attorney previously, or they were an entrepreneur in a different business that wasn't franchised, and they've decided to break into the franchise world.
Yeah.
And we share all those stories, and they give honest feedback of, would you do this all over again? What did you learn? And so we send those resources to people to really challenge them to think through, is this something you want to do? This is probably the second largest life decision you're going to make outside of picking a life partner. I mean, you're going to commit to 5 to 10 plus years of working with this franchise system in this group. You're going to put up a lot of hard-earned money that you've made. Is this the right decision for you to do it? And if this isn't an absolute screaming yes, then it's a no. And so we need to make sure that they're absolutely passionate, have the skill, have the financial resources, are ready to take on the risk and go and do this. Because if they're not, it's not going to end well for them or the franchisor. And that just continues to potentially hurt the franchise model as a whole. And our goal is to be an advocate for, hey, this is a great path to wealth if it's the right fit, the right person at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Could you build Franzy without AI technology?
I don't think so, at least not effectively. I think there's portals out there like Franchise Gator, Franchise 123 that I think have been portals. They got all the data there, but the ability to leverage AI to really give high quality recommendations of the thousands that are out there and identify all these things, it's impossible for a human being to do at this scale, at least well. And we're living in a time where AI is making our ability to synthesize data and information at a scale and at a level that we just have never seen or been able to do before.
Which leads me to a question about, should people be concerned? Go buy a franchise because AI is going to replace your job. But what's to say that AI won't replace a franchisee?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think some of the things that I'm seeing, and I'm very in touch with this kind of early stage venture world and some of the newest ideas and newest use cases of AI because of the world that we're in. And I'm seeing things that are exciting, but also, to be honest, very terrifying. And because there's a world where I think a lot of white collar jobs, if you're working behind a computer 40 hours a week, a lot of those computer-driven tasks are going to be able to be replicated. And in today's society, those tasks are some of the highest-paying jobs. It's software engineers, it's radiologists who are reading and looking at medical charts that AI can identify the lung cancer faster and more accurately than a 10-year trained medical student or medical doctor can. And not to say that radiologists are going to be completely eliminated, but instead of needing 100 of them, you might only need 20, and AI is doing the work of the other 80, and the 20 are now just patient-facing and quality checking and making sure that things are being read appropriately. But I do think we're going to, at a very fast clip, see a lot of white-collar jobs be displaced by AI, and I think people either need to get really good at using these tools, so they're one of the top, they're the 20 radiologists that get left job security, or you need to reinvent yourself and start investing in hard assets like real estate, or getting into some sort of entrepreneurship, whether that's an independently owned business or a franchise. And you ask the question, well, what if AI disrupts, franchise owners? I think that day could come, but I think we've got a good 10 to 20 year period where owners are going to benefit the most from these tools. They're going to be able to make, their product faster. They're going to provide their service in a more efficient way. And the owners will reap the benefits of these changes until the franchisor says, well, hey, why don't we just corporately do all this, because AI and, robotics have gotten to a place where we can actually manage these things at scale, and we don't need the franchisee the way we used to. But I think we're a decade out from that change. I think the change now is going to be a renaissance of, the American dream again, and getting into ownership and taking control over your career and your income and your life.
Even at that, I think there has to be some concern, because if AI could replace radiologists, which is a fairly serious and complex profession, and I don't want to put down any profession, but surely it could replace maybe some of the service businesses or people working in restaurants. I don't know if AI can cook, but AI can definitely deliver food to a table. We see that happening with robots. Not very well so far, but you might get a worse meal or a better meal if you rely on the robot. So I think 10 years at least we have in some of these cases. But I think we need to be concerned about, can my franchise be superseded by AI technology to the point where they just don't need me? I can't imagine, I guess I can imagine robot coming to my house and painting the walls. I don't know that I'll ever see that or want that. There's also the human element, not getting my radiology information if I have cancer from my radiologist or from my cancer physician, my oncologist. I don't know that I want to talk to a machine. But
Yep.
25 years from now or 100 years from now, maybe that, well, of course, who else would you talk to? This is what we do.
Well, it's really the interpretation of the graphs or the charts, for the radiology example specifically. Another, I think, use cases like software engineers. They're writing lines of code, but AI is getting to the point where it can write 80%, and then you just have the top 20% of human, software engineers reviewing the code and doing some of the more complex things. But what happened to those bottom 60 to 80% that now AI is writing most of the code for? And those are, 3 years ago even were very hard skilled. Today they're still very hard skilled things to do, but the AI is just getting so much smarter and better because it can ingest so much information. But it leads to the question, what do those people go do now?
Yeah. Which leads me to this question, that knowing what you know, what Franzy knows, what experiences you're having, if you were advising yourself or your son or a relative, here's the best franchise, maybe the best brand, but at least a kind of franchise that you should invest in to protect yourself from AI taking over what you do, where would you go? Which field, which industry? Not necessarily a brand, but if you've got a brand, okay, share it.
Yeah, I think the easy kind of blanket category to put out there, because I do think robotics, we have another 10 years before they get good. When you said robots painting your house, I think there's too much interaction in the physical world, and robotics aren't there yet, but they're advancing at a very, very fast pace. But I think home services is a pretty protected category for now, because of the complexity and the human element that still has to happen in the physical world. Businesses that are reliant on computers or being behind a screen, I think are going to be faster to be disrupted. I think restaurants, you're seeing it already at some of the QSRs where you go order on a screen and they don't need the person running the cashier anymore. And very quickly, I think you're going to see robots dipping the fries into the fryer and pressing the burger, and this kind of like structured piece. But that's still good for the owner. So I think fast food is one that's still good to get into, but I think would quickly be displaced by a large franchisor saying, hey, we can have robots run most of these stores. We don't need a franchisee to run the 60 employees or 50 employees that we used to have per location to run a McDonald's or to run a Dave's Hot Chicken. So my advice to family members when they ask is home services, I think, is good, especially if it's in the context of fear of AI. But more than anything, I typically ask that question of, well, financially, where are you at? Operationally, what are you good at? And then what kind of things do you like? Because if you don't like the business, I think it's going to be hard to commit to doing something for 5+ years. And that answer does vary. There's some concepts right now that I like. The indoor golf simulators, I think, are interesting. Because again, AI might not necessarily replace that yet. It's still expensive to put that into your own house, and people want to go experience that. And it's a good semi-absentee, low employee or no employee business that kicks off good cash flow.
How many people are saying to you, I want to keep my job, but I want to invest in a franchise, and I only want to work 5 hours a week. Tell me which ones are out there. And there are franchisors who say you only need 5 hours a week. Come on. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's possible. There are some good absentee or part-time franchises that provide full-time rewards. I know of a couple, but not many. And yet,
so we break it into.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we break it into three models. There's the executive model where you can really only do 2 to 5 hours a week, but there's not that many of those, and I'll come back to that in a second. There's semi-absentee where it's still 20 hours a week, and maybe you can do that on top of your full-time job. And then there's the owner-operator where you've quit your job and this is 100% what you're doing. We tell people that the people that are the most successful in franchising are either the owner-operator type where they've gone all in and they're getting the business to cash flowing as quickly as possible so they can produce an income again to live off of. The other group that I think is, it's a very small group, but that executive model where they're really only in it 5 to 10 hours a week, but they're so they're so wealthy and well off that they have GMs and a director of operations, and they've got someone running this chain of 5+ locations, and mostly in food. So you think about the big multi-unit, multi-brand operators that own 30 Dave's Hot Chicken and 20 pop-up bagels, and I think you don't need 20 plus to do that, but I think you do need 3 minimum plus to do that, where you have a GM who's kind of overseeing everything. You're giving up profits in order to have a different quality of life, maybe maintain another full-time job, or not have to be so hands-on in the business. That is possible, but you have to be, I think, very involved at least in that first year. You can't just open 3 stores in 2 months and hire a GM and you're good to go. I think it starts out owner-operator or semi-absentee and evolves into an executive ownership model, but you can't shortcut that first year unless you're buying an existing chain that has that team in place and built out already.
Is my assumption correct that people who are investing in franchises today, they're looking for full-time income? They're looking to replace their job. And if they were used to $150,000 or $300,000 a year, that's what they want the franchise to produce as well. And yet, some people think they're going to do that by spending fewer hours. And, forget about 40 hours. In the beginning, you might be working 7 days a week in a franchise. But do people not realize that, or is that not what's happening today?
I think the educated, well-read, well-informed ones do understand where, hey, my goal eventually is to replace my income, but I know that that's going to take a few years and me being very involved in the business and scaling it from 1 to 2 to 3 before I'm able to do that. Others get that this could be not a side hustle, but extra income for their family that they could work a little, almost like taking on a second job or a part-time job. Instead of working at a restaurant nights and weekends, they're investing into a more, like this golf simulator franchise.
Right.
There's 0 employees. It's almost like an Anytime Fitness where you fob in. That's a business someone can keep their full-time job, and the income that they produce off of each location probably would never, equate 1-to-1 to their current salary. But if they open 1 and then 2 and then 3, they might get there eventually, and now they can start to take their foot off the gas a little bit at their corporate job or their day job because they've got this thing that they've built up over time.
Yeah, good. Well, people need to know that nothing is easy, not even in franchising. There are always complications. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, and you should stay away from it. But I love what Franzy is doing in terms of helping to educate people and helping them to have information available to them based on their own personality, their own financial possibilities, and also based on their desire of what they want to do, where they want to spend 10 or 20 years of their life. And we have too little of that occurring in franchising. This should not just be a financial transaction. Unfortunately, for many in franchising, it becomes that. So congratulations to you, Alex, and your team, and to Franzy for what you're putting together and offering to people, and right now offering it free. That's a great advantage. I'm happy that you're doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think the industry needs it. Like I said at the beginning of the conversation, I think was one of those folks from the outside looking in, thinking franchising is either for wealthy people or
Right.
There's all these kind of bad actors I got to be on the lookout for. And I think after being in franchising, it's a great business model. It's a great way to build wealth if you find the right brand and work with the right people. And Franzy's goal is to help you do that, finding the right brand and the right people to work with.
Yeah, that's a big if, finding the right brand and the right people. It's bigger than most people realize. But with technology, with tools like you're providing, with good people who understand what we're talking about and want to help people, then absolutely franchising is the way to go. If you're a good fit for it and all the ways that are important, then franchising should be your future. It's just not for everybody. And I appreciate your support for the Titus Center for Franchising, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, John.
Oh, sure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.